Hi, my name is David, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Eduflow. In this presentation, I'll try to describe what makes feedback good and consequently also how to give good feedback to others. So I've done a fair bit of research on the subject during my PhD, and there's a couple of papers that looked into the kind of the anatomy of what good feedback is, and it seems like there's many things that make feedback good, but in the essence, there's four things, and those are the four things I'll talk about here. So the four components of good feedback is that it is constructive, that is specific, that it's justified, and that it's kind. And really good feedback should have all four properties. And if you're lacking one of them, it doesn't make the feedback useless, but it'll be best if you have everything. So to properly explain this, I'm going to take an example. I'm going to take some bad feedback, and then I'm going to make it constructive, specific, justified, and kind to show how to make feedback better. So let's assume that we're talking to a colleague. They wrote an email, and we want to give them some feedback on that email. If we just say, your email is really bad, then that is really bad feedback. It's not good in any way. It fails on all of our four parameters. So let's try to dive in. Let's take the four things one by one and see how we could improve this feedback. So constructive, what does that mean? Constructive feedback is helpful and explains how to improve. So we want the feedback to guide the receiver to improving what they've done, right? So your email is really bad. It doesn't tell you how to make it better. So if we add something like your email is really bad, if you want to improve it, make it shorter. It's still not great feedback, but it's at least become more constructive. We're telling the receiver of the feedback, how can you take what you have and make it better? So that's the first thing you want to do with your feedback, is to make it help the receiver. The second part is specific. So feedback is specific if it's pointing to specific things in the work and giving examples. So we have the feedback from before, and we want to make it more specific because it's not clear in the initial version here. How do you improve it? How do you make it shorter? So your email is really bad. If you want to improve it, make it shorter. For example, I think you could cut out the first part where you describe your background. So here we're telling people, first of all, we're giving them a more concrete idea about what they can do to improve. Shorten it by doing this. But we're also pointing to a place in the email where this length is a problem, right? So your email is too long. And I think the introduction is a good example. The first part is something you could cut. So that's the part that's too long. So now our feedback has gone from being extremely poor to a bit better. It's constructive, it's specific, and then we can move on to justification. So justified feedback is something that gives explanations, reasons, and arguments for why it says what it does, right? So generally people can react quite negatively to feedback that they don't find justified. I'll just move my image a little bit here. So to make our feedback here justified, we will add a bit of justification at the end, right? So the email is really bad. If you want to improve it, make it shorter. For example, I think you could cut out the first part where you describe your background. You might think your background is interesting, but the reader only cares about themselves. So now we're trying to justify why this background should go. There's probably better examples of justification, and there's probably better ways to justify. This is just one example of adding a bit of justification here. What you really want to do here is to say, for example, you could give an argument about like short emails get 50% more responses, and your email is 20% longer than the average email. That's another form of justification using data and clear arguments to say like, it's not just me, the idiot, that think your email is too long. It's actually like scientifically valid feedback that your email should be shorter. And then the last thing we want to do here is that we want to make sure that the feedback is given in a kind and friendly way. So there's a couple things in the feedback here originally that is really poorly written in terms of kindness. Your email is really bad. No need to say that. You might think your background is interesting. You could write that in a better way, right? So I changed a few things here. I said your email could use a bit more work. It's not as harsh and could use a bit more work as a nicer way to phrase the idea that something is of low quality. Instead of saying, here's how to improve it, you can start by saying one way to improve it, to kind of put a little bit of doubt on yourself, but then the receiver of the feedback will take it quite differently and say like, oh yeah, I guess that is true. And I'm able to take this feedback if I want to. And then in the end here, you might think your background is interesting. Another way to phrase that is, while your background story is super interesting, it might not be useful for convincing the reader. So kindness and friendliness is very important, but it's not to be confused with the feedback having to be positive. If work is of low quality and we give it feedback, we need to be fair and we need to be honest. But the way in which we deliver this honesty and this message is important, and giving feedback with a kind voice will make the feedback recipient a lot more receptive to our feedback. So to sum up, if we want feedback to be good, it should be constructive, it should help and explain how to improve. It should be specific, it should point to specific things and give examples. It should be justified, give explanations, reasons, and arguments. And finally, it should be delivered with a kind and friendly language. So this is just a very quick introduction to some frameworks for giving useful feedback. I hope it can be helpful both here and in the future. Thanks a lot.